testing takes a long time and it makes it really expensive to make anything new. But it also is there for a reason, because it's like people are living in these big, tall buildings, and if an earthquake hits, you want to make sure that it's not like some new experimental building method that collapses. You want to make sure that you can trust that it's going to stay erected.
When we were connecting before, we talked a lot about Turkey. I thought that was interesting, your points of view. Oh, man, it was so tragic that all those people ended up dying and all those buildings were falling. Why was that?
I'm not an expert on Turkey by any means, so I think take it with a grain of salt. But from an outsider looking in, the thing that makes innovation so slow in the construction industry is this building code that is very strict. It's kind of like the equivalent of like the FDA for like the pharmaceutical industry. Testing takes a long time and it makes it really expensive to make anything new. But it also is there for a reason, because it's like people are living in these big, tall buildings, and if an earthquake hits, you want to make sure that it's not like some new experimental building method that collapses. You want to make sure that you can trust that it's going to stay erected. And so, like I mentioned, that like a fraction of concrete is that glue cement, and building code says that you have to use a certain portion of cement in your mixture of concrete, especially if you're using it for load-bearing walls or any kind of a load-bearing, like a column, and you have to mix it with a certain amount of steel, which is the rebar that kind of gives you the skeleton of it in the center. Well, what happened in Turkey, from my understanding, is that there was some bribery that took place, and there was companies that built buildings that didn't follow building code, because cement is the most expensive part of this mixture. And so, of the individual per volume, the components. And so by subbing it out for other cheaper, essentially materials that are the glue, you can save cost. And what a lot of these buildings did is that they built to a lower specification than what was required. And when building code, somebody went to inspect it and looked at the building and they said, oh, this is not built properly, it's not built to code. Nobody enforced it. And then finally what happened is the government said, we'll give you a penalty. So you have to pay this penalty. But the problem is that the penalty was less than the cost savings. So if you're a business person, you're trying to make just a black and white financial decision. You're like, why the F am I going to pay to put all this expensive stuff in there if I don't need to? And the building is up there and it's fine and it's not collapsing. I'm just going to take the penalty and build it cheaper. It was like this ticking time bomb, that it was like the buildings were fine. They didn't need to use all that cement and all that rebar to keep the building erected. But in
until
the event
the earth
of
shakes,
a catastrophic earthquake, there's a reason why building code said you have to do this. And so I think it was just like a lax forcing of the rules and some bad policy that led to this.
Hopefully that changes now after all this.